The pharmacy was nearly empty at 2:17 a.m. Just a tired cashier, flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps, and a young woman clutching baby supplies like her life depended on them. Her name tag from work read, Kira Stevens. But that wasn't her real name. Not the one she was born with. Not the one she ran from. The cashier's face showed nothing as she scanned each item. Baby formula. Infant fever medicine. Diapers. Children's Tylenol. That'll be $47.89, the cashier mumbled, barely looking up. Kira nodded, fishing out her debit card. Her fingers trembled slightly. She'd been up for 20 hours straight. The twins were both sick. Miho had finally fallen asleep, but Eli's fever wouldn't break. The cashier swiped her card. Declined. The word hung in the air like a slap. Kira's stomach dropped. That's impossible, she whispered. I just got paid yesterday. The cashier shrugged. Want to try another card? Panic rose in Kira's chest. She needed these supplies. Now. She dug through her wallet frantically, old receipts, library card, a photo of the twins, crumpled bills that wouldn't cover half the total. Then her fingers touched something cold. Another card, tucked into a hidden pocket she never used. She pulled it out without really looking at it. Just desperate to pay and get home. She handed it over. The cashier swiped. Approved. Relief flooded her body. But it lasted exactly 6 seconds, the time it took to finally notice what card she had just used. Black metal. Silver letters. A name embossed that wasn't hers. Park J1. Her ex-husband's joint account card. The one she was supposed to destroy 3 years ago when she fled in the middle of the night. Her phone rang. Unknown number. But deep in her bones, she knew exactly who it was. With trembling fingers, she answered. Silence stretched across the line. Then came a voice she'd heard in her nightmares for 3 years. Deep. Controlled. Dangerous. Sora. Her real name. The one she had buried. Baby formula. Infant fever medication. His voice was ice. Each word a knife. Are you pregnant, or have you been hiding my child from me? The phone nearly slipped from her hand. Park J1. The heir to Seoul's most powerful underground empire. The man she ran from in the middle of the night. He found her. Now, before we get into how she ended up in this moment, running from a man who loved her so obsessively it terrified her, I need you to do something real quick. If you're new here and you love stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, stories with secrets, betrayal, and love that refuses to die, this is exactly where you belong. So go ahead, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know who's writing this story out with me. Seoul, South Korea was never supposed to be more than a temporary stop for Sora Kim. Just a 23-year-old Korean American visiting her ancestral homeland for the first time after her grandmother passed away, leaving her a small inheritance and an old family home in a quiet neighborhood. That summer was meant for healing. For connecting with roots she barely understood. For figuring out who she was beyond the grief that had shadowed her since her grandmother's death. Not for falling in love with the most dangerous man in Seoul. It happened on her 3rd night in Korea. The Myeongdong night market was a maze of lights, sounds, and smells that overwhelmed her senses. Vendors called out in rapid-fire Korean she couldn't follow. Crowds pushed from every direction. She had wandered too far from the tourist areas, into sections where English signs disappeared. Then her phone died. Sora stood frozen in the middle of the surging crowd, completely lost. Tears pricked at her eyes. She was too embarrassed to ask for help, her broken Korean failing her when she needed it most. You look like you need help. The voice came from behind her, deep and calm amid the chaos. Sora turned. He stood like a pillar in the crowd, tall, unusually tall for a Korean man, with broad shoulders and a face that seemed carved from stone. Sharp jawline. High cheekbones. Dark eyes that didn't just look at her but through her, as if he could read every thought she'd ever had. He wore a simple black coat and white shirt, nothing flashy. But something about him made people move aside without even realizing they were doing it. Like the crowd instinctively recognized a predator in their midst. Sora swallowed. "I'm lost," she admitted, her Korean clumsy and childlike. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but something close. "Then let me find you," he said, switching effortlessly to perfect English. He extended his hand. Simple. Direct. Waiting. Sora hesitated only for a moment before placing her smaller hand in his. She had no idea that saying yes to this stranger would change her life forever. And not in the way fairy tales promised. The first time Jae-won took Sora to dinner, he blindfolded her in the car. "Trust me," he said, his voice close to her ear. "Where we're going doesn't exist on any tourist map." She should have been frightened. A strange man, a blindfold, a car heading into unknown parts of a foreign city. But something about Jae-won made her feel safe in a way she couldn't explain. When he removed the blindfold, they were standing before a tiny restaurant hidden between two buildings in an alley so narrow their shoulders almost touched both walls. No sign. No menu posted. Just an ancient wooden door and the smell of something incredible cooking inside. "The best galbi in Seoul," he promised. The owner only serves people he knows personally. Inside, the elderly owner greeted Jae-won with deep bows and nervous smiles. When Jae-won introduced Sora, the man's eyebrows shot up, but he said nothing. Just ushered them to the best table. That was the first red flag she missed. Throughout dinner, Jae-won taught her proper Korean phrases, his laugh warm and rich when she butchered the pronunciation. "Your accent is terrible," he said, but his eyes were soft. "I find it completely charming." She learned he was 31. A businessman. "Imports and exports," he said vaguely. "Born in Seoul but educated abroad. Oxford. Harvard Business." He spoke 4 languages fluently. He asked about her life with genuine interest, not the polite questions of a first date, but the deep curiosity of someone mapping every detail to memory. 2 weeks became a month. A month became 2. Every night, he walked her to her grandmother's old house and stopped at the gate. Never invited himself in. Never tried to kiss her. Just watched until she was safely inside, his eyes intense in the streetlight. The 3rd time they met, he brought her favorite flowers. Peonies. She'd mentioned them once, casually. He remembered. The 5th time, he knew her coffee order before she said it. The 8th time, his hand brushed hers across the table. Just barely. The touch sent electricity through her body. When she looked up, his eyes were dark with something that made her breath catch. By the 6th week, she realized she was falling in love with him. By the 8th, she knew it was reckless. He was too perfect. Too controlled. There were things about him she couldn't explain, the way restaurant owners treated him with fearful respect, the black car that sometimes followed them, the phone calls he stepped away to take. But when she was with him, nothing else mattered. The way he looked at her made her feel like the center of the universe. Like she'd been wandering lost her whole life, and he was the home she never knew she was searching for. "I can't stay in Korea forever," she told him one night, as summer was ending. Her visa would expire soon. Reality was catching up to their fantasy. He said nothing, just took her hand and led her through the moonlit garden of her grandmother's house. The night air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. In a small clearing beside an ancient plum tree, he stopped and turned to face her. "I've never believed in fate," he said quietly. "Until I saw you standing lost in that market." Then he knelt. Not in the showy American way, but with quiet dignity. He produced a small box from his pocket, inside, a simple ring. Elegant. Understated. Perfect. "Stay," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay with me. Let me spend a lifetime showing you who I am." She said yes before he finished asking. The wedding was small but traditional. His family attended, elegant people with cold eyes who looked at Sora like she was an interesting puzzle they couldn't quite solve. His mother was beautiful in that sharp, dangerous way that time couldn't touch. She barely spoke to Sora throughout the ceremony. When she did, her perfect English carried undercurrents Sora couldn't decipher. "My son is very determined," she said during the reception. "When he wants something, he obtains it. No matter the cost." It sounded like a warning. But Sora was in love. And love made it easy to ignore the strange deference of the wedding staff. The whispers that stopped when she entered rooms. The way even Jaewon's friends seemed more like subordinates. The honeymoon was perfect, 2 weeks on a private island she couldn't find on any map. Just the two of them, the ocean, and nights that made her wonder how she ever lived before him. They returned to Seoul as husband and wife. Jaewon brought her to their new home, not an apartment as she'd expected, but a sprawling estate with walls and gardens and staff who bowed deeply when she entered. "This is too much," she whispered. "Nothing is too much for my wife," he answered, the possessiveness in his voice making her shiver. For exactly 2 weeks, Sora believed she had found her happily ever after. Then she discovered who she had really married. The first crack in Sora's perfect world appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. She was exploring their home, still learning the maze of rooms and hallways, when voices drifted from Jaewon's study. The door was slightly open. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but one phrase froze her in place. The shipment was intercepted. 3 men dead. She peeked through the gap. Jaewon sat behind his desk, expression hard as granite. 3 men stood before him, not the polished businessmen he usually met with, but harder men with cold eyes and rigid postures. "Find the leak," Jaewon ordered. His voice wasn't the one she knew, the warm, gentle tone he used with her. This voice belonged to someone else. Someone dangerous. "When you do, bring them to me. Alive." The men bowed, not the casual nods of employees, but the deep, fearful bows of subjects to a king. Sora backed away, heart hammering. A misunderstanding. It had to be. But the next day brought another crack. While Jaewon was showering, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message appeared on the screen. "The Taiwanese agree to your terms. They know crossing the Black Lotus would be suicide." Black Lotus. The name tickled something in her memory, a news article she'd skimmed years ago. Something about organized crime in Asia. That night, unable to sleep, she slipped out of bed and into his study. Her hands trembled as she opened his laptop, surprised he hadn't locked it. As if he never imagined she would look. What she found shattered everything. News articles. Police reports. Business filings with names she recognized from their wedding. The Black Lotus wasn't just any organization. It was one of the most powerful underground empires in South Korea, with tentacles reaching into legitimate businesses, politics, and beyond. And Park Jae-won wasn't just a businessman. He was its heir. Its future. Sora sat frozen, staring at the screen until the sun began to rise. She didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just felt ice spreading through her veins as every strange moment of their courtship suddenly made terrible sense. The restaurant owners who treated him with fearful respect. The deference of strangers. The vague answers about his business. She'd married a stranger. When Jae-won found her in the study at dawn, still staring at the computer, he didn't seem surprised. Just resigned. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," he said quietly. The calm in his voice ignited something in her. She stood, knocking the chair backward. "Find out what way?" Her voice shook with fury. "That my husband is a criminal? That everything about you is a lie? When exactly was I supposed to find out, Jae-won? After I was too trapped to leave?" "I never lied about who I am," he said, stepping closer. "I just omitted certain details about what I do." "Certain details?" She laughed, the sound brittle. "You're the heir to a criminal empire. That's not a detail, that's your entire life." "I was going to tell you," he said. For the first time since she'd known him, something cracked in his perfect composure. His eyes held real fear. Not of her anger, but of her leaving. I just wanted you to love me first. Not fear me. How can I trust anything you've said? Her voice dropped to a whisper. How do I know if any of it was real? He moved toward her, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. When he took her hands, she was too numb to pull away. Because I never lied about how I feel. His voice broke slightly. I love you, Sora. That's the only truth that matters. She should have left. Every logical part of her brain screamed to run. But she stayed. Because love makes people do things they know they shouldn't. In the weeks that followed, Sora watched her world transform. Bodyguards appeared, silent men who followed her everywhere. Her walks in the garden now included a shadow 10 paces behind. Shopping trips were arranged with military precision, stores cleared before she arrived. Her phone calls were monitored. She noticed how the staff always seemed to know where she was, what she was doing. Friends she tried to make disappeared from her life after 1 or 2 meetings, deemed unsuitable by J1's security team. It's for your protection, he always said when she protested. His voice gentle but immovable. My enemies would use you to hurt me. At night, when he held her, she could almost believe the cage was built from love. Almost. On their 1-year anniversary, he gave her a diamond bracelet that couldn't be removed without a special key. So I'm always with you, he said, kissing her wrist where it locked in place. She smiled and thanked him, ignoring the weight of it on her arm. By the time their 2nd anniversary approached, Sora had learned to live within her boundaries. She had everything money could buy. Beautiful clothes. Exotic trips, always with security, always to safe locations. Respect from everyone who saw her on J1's arm. And at the center of it all, a husband who still looked at her like she hung the moon and stars. Who still made her body come alive with a single touch. Who still whispered, "You're everything," when he thought she was asleep. For 2 years, Sora convinced herself the cage was made of love, not control. Then she got pregnant. And everything shattered. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. Sora stared at it in the bathroom, hands trembling. 2 pink lines. Positive. A baby. Her baby. For the first time since discovering the truth about J1, she felt something that was purely hers. Something no one could control or monitor or arrange. A tiny flutter of life that belonged to her. She sat on the cool marble floor, pressing the test against her heart, and wept. Not from sadness. From something that felt dangerously like hope. When she finally showed J1 that night, his reaction shocked her. His careful mask, the one he wore even with her now, cracked completely. His eyes widened, filled with naked emotion. His hands actually trembled as he took the test from her. A baby, he whispered. Our baby? Then he dropped to his knees before her. Not like when he proposed, this wasn't calculated or controlled. This was a man overwhelmed. He pressed his face against her still flat stomach, arms wrapped around her waist, and his shoulders shook. Thank you, he murmured against her skin. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That night, he held her like she might disappear. The hardness that had gradually taken over his features these past years melted away. He made phone calls, excited, rapid-fire Korean she couldn't fully follow, and suddenly their lives revolved around her health. The best doctors appeared. Her diet changed, special foods prepared by a new chef. Vitamins. Teas. Ancient Korean remedies his grandmother had sworn by. Nothing will happen to you, he promised, kissing her forehead as they fell asleep. Either of you. For 6 beautiful weeks, Sora remembered what it felt like to be truly happy. To be the center of J1's universe not as a possession, but as a miracle. To feel like maybe, just maybe, this baby could heal whatever had broken between them. Then, 8 weeks into the pregnancy, she woke up to cramping pain and sheets stained with blood. J1, she whispered, shaking him awake. Her voice sounded far away. Something's wrong. What followed was a blur. The private hospital. The gentle doctor with sad eyes. The ultrasound that showed nothing where there should have been a heartbeat. I'm sorry, the doctor said. Sometimes these things just happen. Just happen. As if it were nothing. As if her world hadn't just collapsed. Jae-won never left her side. Not during the procedure to remove what they clinically called the remaining tissue. Not during the car ride home, when she stared silently out the window, unable to feel anything at all. Not during the endless night that followed, when she finally broke down in gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to tear her apart. He held her through all of it. His own grief etched into the lines of his face, but controlled. Always controlled. Except when he thought she was asleep, then she heard him in the bathroom, the muffled sound of a man trying desperately not to let anyone hear him cry. We'll try again, he whispered into her hair, night after night. We'll have a family. I promise you, Sora. Everything will be okay. But something in her had broken. Something that couldn't be fixed with promises or gentle touches or even love. In the weeks that followed, Sora moved through life like a ghost. She smiled when expected. Ate when food was placed before her. Nodded at appropriate moments in conversations she didn't really hear. But inside, she was hollow. Empty. And in that emptiness, she finally saw things she had been blind to before. The way his mother looked at her during her weekly visits, not with sympathy, but with calculation. As if assessing damaged goods. The whispered conversations that stopped the moment she entered rooms, staff exchanging glances, words cutting off mid-sentence. The fact that in 2 years of marriage, she still had no real friends. No connections outside the carefully controlled circle Jae-won permitted. The realization that she knew almost nothing about the empire her husband commanded, just enough to understand she was married to a man who could make people disappear with a single phone call. At night, lying beside Jae-won while he slept, she stared at the ceiling and wondered, had she made a terrible mistake? Was this beautiful prison all there would ever be? Would she ever feel truly free again? It gets better, her mother-in-law said during a painfully formal tea, 3 weeks after the miscarriage. Not kindly. Not sympathetically. Just stating a fact. The first one is always the hardest. The body learns. Sora nearly dropped her cup. The first one? My first was also a failure, the older woman continued, sipping her tea calmly. But then Jae-won came. Strong from the beginning. As your next one will be. First one. Failure. As if they were discussing a business transaction. Sora told herself she was healing. That the grief would pass. That things would return to normal, whatever normal meant in a marriage built on half-truths and careful omissions. But 2 months later, she overheard a conversation that proved her worst fears were real. And it didn't come from his enemies. It came from his mother. So there's Sora, walking down the hallway of this massive house with a tea tray in her hands, trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law. You know how it is when you're desperately trying to make someone like you? That was her with Jae-won's mom. The woman had shown up out of nowhere that evening, and man, the air between them was so tense you could practically see it. Sora figured maybe some tea might help smooth things over. Worth a shot, right? As she got closer to Jae-won's study, she could hear voices. The door wasn't fully closed, just open a tiny crack with light spilling out. She slowed down, not wanting to barge in on their conversation. That's when she heard her own name. Can't continue with Sora. His mom's voice was cold as ice. This marriage is a liability. The other families are laughing at us. An American wife who can't even carry a child properly. You need to end this, Jae-won. Permanently. Sora just stood there, completely frozen. The cups on her tray started rattling because her hands were shaking so bad. End this. Permanently. The silence that followed felt like forever. Then came Jae-won's voice, super calm, super cold, I'll handle it. The tray just slipped. She didn't even realize she'd dropped it until she heard the cup smash against the floor. Hot tea splashed all over her legs, but honestly, she couldn't even feel it. I'll handle it. Those 3 little words just destroyed her entire world. She didn't stick around to see who'd come check out the noise. Didn't wait for excuses or explanations. She just ran. Back to their bedroom, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grab the doorknob. "I'll handle it." Look, Sora wasn't stupid. She'd been living in Jaewon's world long enough to know what those words meant. When people became problems in his family business, they got handled. They disappeared. They had accidents. She had to stuff her fist against her mouth to keep from screaming. For 2 whole years, she'd been telling herself that all the control, all the security, all the rules were because he loved her so much. That the man everyone else was terrified of would never hurt her. But that's the thing about monsters, right? They wear masks until they don't need them anymore. And apparently, she wasn't needed anymore. Sora didn't waste time crying. Something in her brain just switched to survival mode. Ice cold. Crystal clear. She had exactly 1 shot to get away. Tonight. Jaewon had this big meeting he couldn't miss. That gave her maybe 3 hours, tops. She packed like someone on autopilot. 1 small bag. Just the absolute must-haves. Some clothes. Her real passport she'd hidden in a secret compartment in her jewelry box. The cash she'd been squirreling away from her allowance each month, all in American dollars that couldn't be traced. She left her phone right there on the nightstand. No way was she taking that tracking device with her. She cut off that fancy diamond bracelet he'd locked onto her wrist, the one he said was so he'd always be with her. How creepy did that seem now? She put her wedding ring on his pillow. No note. Nothing else. Nothing he could use to find her. Then she snuck out through the garden. There was this one spot where the cameras didn't quite reach. She'd noticed it months ago but never had a reason to use it. Until now. Her old college roommate, Jenny, was teaching English in Seoul. She was the one friend Jaewon hadn't managed to chase away, mostly because they only talked through Jenny's school email that he didn't monitor. "Don't ask questions," Sora begged when she showed up at Jenny's tiny apartment in the middle of the night. "Just help me disappear." And Jenny, God bless her, didn't ask a single question. Just nodded and got to work. New passport. New identity. Plane tickets that zigzagged through 3 countries before heading to America, just to break the trail. 3 days later, Sora Kim was gone. Kira Stevens appeared in this little town in Oregon where people minded their own business and nobody cared about your past. Now this is where things get really intense. If you're still here, I already know you're invested in this story. But quick question, are you subscribed yet? Because what happens next is the kind of twist that's going to have you pausing the video just to process it. Go ahead, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I see every single comment, and I love knowing who's writing these stories out with me. Alright. Back to Sora, or should I say, Kira. 6 weeks after getting to America, Kira found herself throwing up. Again. 5th morning in a row. No way. It couldn't be. How was that even possible? She and Jaewon had been trying for months after the miscarriage with 0 luck. The doctors had said it was probably stress messing with her body. But there she was, sitting on the closed toilet lid in a pharmacy bathroom, staring at yet another pregnancy test with 2 pink lines. She was pregnant. Again. The ultrasound 2 weeks later dropped an even bigger bombshell. Congratulations, the tech said with this big smile. It's twins. Twins. 2 tiny little heartbeats, flickering on the screen like little butterfly wings. Kira just sat there with her hand pressed over her mouth, crying her eyes out. Not because she was scared or sad. Because she suddenly felt this fierce, mama bear love that hit her like a truck. These babies were hers. All hers. And she would do absolutely anything to keep them safe. Even if that meant their father could never, ever know they existed. The pregnancy was rough, not gonna lie. Working through morning sickness that lasted all day. Finding a job that wouldn't dig too deep into her background. Trying to prepare for 2 babies with basically no money, no family, no support system. She got lucky and found work as a vet assistant. The owner was this older guy who didn't care that her resume had suspicious gaps. Didn't ask why she had no references. Just needed someone who wasn't squeamish about cleaning kennels and holding scared animals. She rented this tiny apartment above somebody's garage. Saved every penny she could. Prepared as best she could for 2 babies on a shoestring budget. When the twins were born, 2 perfect little boys with these big dark eyes just like their dads, she named them Miho and Eli. One name from her Korean past, one from her American future. Both parts of who she was. For 3 years, Kira built this quiet little life. She worked. She raised her boys. She kept her head down. She made acquaintances but no real friends. Took 0 risks. Sometimes, in the middle of the night when the boys were finally asleep, she'd just lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering if Jae-won was still out there looking for her. If he'd figured out why she ran. If he even cared anymore. 3 years of jumping at shadows. 3 years of scanning every crowd for tall Korean men with broad shoulders. 3 years of nightmares where he found her, sometimes to hurt her, sometimes to take the boys, sometimes just standing there asking why she left. For 3 whole years, Kira told herself she was free. For 3 whole years, she convinced herself he had forgotten her. But that night at the pharmacy, when she accidentally swiped his card, she realized Park Jae-won had never stopped watching. And his patience had just run out. Kira stood frozen in the pharmacy, the phone pressed to her ear, her whole body just numb. Like she was watching herself from outside her own body. Jae-won, she finally managed to whisper. Please. 3 years, he cut her off. His voice was so controlled it was terrifying. Like ice about to crack. 3 years of searching. Of wondering if you were even alive. She could hear him breathing on the other end. Not heavy. Not angry. Just measured. Deliberate. Like he was fighting for control. And now I find you buying baby formula. The edge in his voice could have cut glass. How old are they, Sora? She closed her eyes. God, that name. Her real name. No one had called her that in so long. Please, she tried again. You don't understand. I'm already on a plane, he said simply. I'll be there in 11 hours. LAX to Portland. I have a car waiting. Her knees almost gave out. How do you even know where? The card, he said, like it was obvious. Did you think I wouldn't set alerts? That I wouldn't keep that account open, just in case? The cashier was staring at her now. Kira turned away, lowering her voice. Jae-won, listen to me. You can't just. I expect to meet my children, he said. Not a request. A statement. All of them. I'm assuming it's more than one, given the amount of formula. Kira's throat closed up. How could he know that from just the purchase? 11 hours, Sora. His voice softened, just barely. Don't run. Not again. I'll find you anyway, and next time, I won't be so gentle. The line went dead. Kira just stood there, receipt in one hand, phone in the other, the pharmacy's fluorescent lights suddenly too bright, too harsh. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. He was coming. He knew. She drove home like a crazy person, ran 3 stop signs, and nearly hit a cat. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. What now? Run again? With what money? With 2 toddlers? In the middle of the night? The babysitter, sweet college kid from down the street, looked up from her textbook when Kira burst through the door. Everything okay, Miss Stevens? Fine. Yes. Just, emergency at the clinic. The lie came easily. How are the boys? Out like lights. Eli's fever broke around 9. Thank God for small mercies. Kira overpaid the sitter, locked every door, checked every window, then just paced. Back and forth. Back and forth. Her mind racing through impossible options. She could call the police. And say what? My ex-husband is coming to see his own kids. The kids he doesn't legally know exist because I used a fake identity. She could call Jenny. But what could Jenny even do from thousands of miles away? She had no money saved this time. No backup plan. No escape route. For 3 years, she'd been living paycheck to paycheck, all her extra cash going to the boys. She'd gotten careless. Comfortable. Stupid. The hours ticked by in a blur of panic and exhaustion. She packed a bag, then unpacked it. Considered calling neighbors, then remembered she barely knew any of them. Thought about hiding at the vet clinic, then realized that would be the first place he'd look. At 3:37 a.m., she finally collapsed on the couch next to the twins, watching their peaceful faces as they slept. Miho with his little arm thrown over his brother. Eli with his thumb half in his mouth. Jaewon's eyes. Jaewon's chin. Jaewon's everything. How had she ever thought she could hide them forever? She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through the blinds. The boys were still asleep, tangled together like puppies. Then came the knock. 3 soft, precise taps. She knew that knock. Her body remembered it before her brain did. For a long moment, she just sat there, unable to move. Then, like a sleepwalker, she rose and crossed to the door. No peephole. She didn't need one. She opened the door. And there he was. Park Jae-won filled the doorframe, taller, leaner than she remembered. Sharper edges. Dangerous in a way he hadn't been before. His hair was shorter. His suit impeccable despite the overnight flight. But his eyes, those eyes were exactly the same. Dark. Intense. Looking at her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for 3 years. Neither of them spoke. What could they possibly say? Hello? Sorry? I hate you. I missed you. Then his gaze shifted. Past her shoulder. Into the apartment. And he saw them. 2 little boys, barely 3 years old, sleep-rumpled on a worn couch. Dark hair. Small faces. Tiny hands. His eyes. Jaewon stared at the twins. His sons. The children he never knew existed. And this man, this powerful, untouchable, dangerous man, did something Kira had never seen before. He broke. It happened so fast that Kira almost missed it, this complete transformation of the man standing in her doorway. 1 second, Jaewon was this perfect statue of control. The next. He just collapsed. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. There was no wailing or beating his chest. It was somehow worse, this quiet, dignified crumbling of a man who had never shown weakness to anyone. He sank to his knees right there in her doorway, his eyes never leaving the twins. His hands, those hands that had commanded empires, that could sign death warrants without hesitation, were shaking. Actually shaking. Then came the tears. Silent. Just sliding down his face like he didn't even notice them. They have my eyes, he whispered, so quiet she almost didn't hear him. Kira stood frozen, caught completely off guard. She'd prepared for his anger. His cold fury. His demands. His threats. She had absolutely no idea what to do with his grief. Part of her wanted to slam the door in his face, to protect her boys, to punish him for finding her. But another part, a part she thought she'd killed years ago, wanted to reach out. To touch his shoulder. To say something. Before she could decide, Miho stirred on the couch. Stretched his little arms above his head. Blinked sleepily. Mama, he called, his voice thick with sleep. Jaewon's head snapped up at the sound. The look on his face, God, Kira would never forget it. Like someone dying of thirst seeing water for the first time. How old? His voice was wrecked, barely holding together. 3, she said. No point lying now. 3 years and 2 months. The math wasn't hard. His eyes closed briefly, like he'd been hit. You were pregnant. Not a question. When you left. You were already pregnant. Kira nodded, her throat too tight to speak. You let me believe I had nothing left of you. His voice cracked down the middle. You let me mourn children I didn't even know were alive. Something snapped inside her, all the fear, all the pain, all the sleepless nights. I thought you were going to kill me, she fired back, her voice rising before she remembered the boys. She lowered it to a fierce whisper. What was I supposed to do? Jae-won looked like she'd slapped him. Genuine shock spread across his face. Then confusion. Then something worse, horror. Pure, absolute horror. Kill you? He stood slowly, unsteadily. Sora, what are you talking about? I heard you, she said, backing up a step. That night. With your mother. She said you needed to end this permanently, and you said, her voice caught. You said, I'll handle it. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Then his face went completely white. Handle it? He raked a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. Sora, I told her I would handle her. I told my mother that if she ever spoke about you like that again, would cut her out of my life completely. The room seemed to tilt under Kira's feet. I was protecting you. From her. Not, his voice broke again. You thought I would hurt you? After everything? After, he gestured helplessly toward the twins. You never came after me, she said, clinging to the one fact that had confirmed her fears all these years. If that's not what you meant, why didn't you come find me? A bitter laugh escaped him. I did. I spent millions. I had people searching in 28 countries. His eyes were haunted. I thought you were dead, Sora. I thought someone had taken you. Hurt you. I tore apart every rival organization looking for answers. But. Your friend Jenny, he continued. The one who helped you. Did you know she kept that secret for exactly 6 days before someone offered her enough money to talk? Kira's blood went cold. What did you do to her? Nothing, he said simply. I paid her. Brought her to our house. Questioned her for 3 days straight. She told me everything she knew, which wasn't much. Said she'd gotten you false papers, but she didn't know your new name or where you'd gone. But the account, Kira said, struggling to make sense of it. The joint account. Why keep it open if you thought I was dead? Something vulnerable crossed his face. Hope, he said simply. Stupid, desperate hope. I kept everything. Your clothes. Your jewelry. Your side of the closet. Untouched. Waiting. He swallowed hard. I kept thinking, if she's alive, if she's out there, she might need money someday. In that moment, Kira realized something that made her knees go weak. She hadn't run from a monster. She had run from a man who loved her, and he had been searching for her ever since. But before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. And his entire expression changed. We need to leave. Now. What? Kira's hand flew to her throat. What do you mean we need to leave? Jae-won was already moving, the grief vanishing from his face, replaced by something cold and focused. The transformation was startling, like watching someone slip on a mask. Get the boys dressed. Now. Grab anything essential, medications, favorite toys. 2 minutes. You can't just barge in here after 3 years and start giving orders, she protested, but there was something in his expression that made her stomach drop. Sora. He gripped her shoulders, his voice urgent but controlled. I wasn't the only one looking for you. What are you talking about? He glanced at his phone again. My brother, Min-jun. He's been trying to take control of the organization for years. He needs to prove I'm unfit to lead, obsessed with finding my American wife instead of focusing on business. Kira's mind raced. Your brother? The quiet one who barely spoke at our wedding? The quiet ones are always the most dangerous. Jae-won moved to the window, carefully peering through the blinds. He made a deal with the Chung family. They'd been tracking you for months. Months? Her blood went cold. But how? Later, he cut her off. My security team is already outside, but Min Jun's people aren't far behind. As if on cue, the twins began to stir. Eli sat up first, rubbing his eyes. Mama? Who's that man? Jae-won froze at the sound of his son's voice. For a split second, that mask slipped again, raw emotion showing through before he controlled it. I'll explain everything later, baby, Kira said, moving quickly to the boys. We need to go on a little trip. Let's get dressed, okay? This was exactly what she'd run from. The danger. The violence. The fear. Her peaceful little life, shattered in seconds. But her children were at risk. And despite everything, she knew, deep in her bones, that Jae-won would die before letting anyone hurt them. My men will take us to a safe house, Jae-won said, turning from the window. Cars out back. As she hurried to dress the confused twins, Kira's mind whirled with questions. How do I know this isn't some trick to take my boys? Our boys, he corrected quietly. Then, seeing her expression, added, if I wanted to take them, would I be warning you? Would I be giving you time to pack? He had a point. She was throwing clothes into a backpack when she heard it, a faint sound from the back of the apartment. A window sliding open. Jae-won heard it too. His entire body tensed. Get behind me, he ordered, voice barely above a whisper. But now. Everything happened so fast. The back door splintered open. Two men in dark clothes rushed in. Jae-won moved like water, fluid, precise, lethal. The first man went down without even a scream. The second pulled a gun. Kira didn't think. She grabbed the heavy lamp from beside the couch and swung it with everything she had. It connected with the man's head with a sickening crack. He staggered, and Jae-won finished him with a single strike. He looked at her with something like surprise. You learned to fight. Single mom. Bad neighborhood. What did you expect? More sounds from outside. Shouting. A car engine revving. We need to go, Jae-won said, already moving toward the twins. Now. Kira scooped up Eli while Jae-won reached for Miho. For a heartbeat, she saw it, the awe on his face as he touched his son for the first time. The little boy blinked up at this stranger with familiar eyes. That's when the third man appeared in the doorway. None of them had heard him. He was smaller than the others. Younger. With a face that reminded Kira of someone. Min Jun. Jae-won's brother. His gun was already raised, pointed not at Jae-won, but at Miho. Hello, brother, he said softly. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Jae-won didn't hesitate. Didn't think. Just moved. He twisted, placing his body between the gun and his son. The shot was deafening in the small apartment. Jae-won staggered, one hand pressed to his side. But he didn't fall. Instead, he lunged forward, covering the distance to his brother in 2 strides. The gun clattered to the floor. The smaller man tried to run, but Jae-won caught him by the throat. Never, he growled, voice thick with pain, touch what's mine. 2 more men, Jae-won's security team, burst through the front door. They took Min Jun, securing him with practiced efficiency. Only then did Jae-won turn back to Kira. Blood was spreading across his white shirt, but he smiled. Actually smiled. You okay? He asked, swaying slightly. Me? Jae-won, you're shot. He looked down at the wound, then back at her. And for the first time since he arrived, his face relaxed into something real. I finally protected them, he whispered. Then he collapsed. The hospital waiting room was freezing. Kira sat with a twin on each side of her, both finally asleep after hours of questions she couldn't answer. Miho's head was heavy against her arm. Eli had curled into a tight ball, thumb in his mouth, something he only did when he was really scared. The clock on the wall read 4:17 a.m. They'd been here for almost 9 hours. 9 hours since Jae-won had collapsed in her apartment. 9 hours since he'd taken a bullet meant for their son. 9 hours of surgery, of waiting, of wondering if he would live. The doctor had come out twice. Still working. Stable but critical. Words that meant nothing and everything. Jae-won's security team was everywhere, men in dark suits stationed at every entrance, speaking in hushed Korean into their earpieces. One of them had told her that Min-jun was being handled. She didn't ask what that meant. Mrs. Park? She looked up. Another doctor stood there, looking tired but relieved. He's awake, the doctor said. Asking for you. My boys. My men will watch them, said a security guard she hadn't noticed approach. No one will get near them. Part of her wanted to refuse. To grab the twins and run while she had the chance. But that part was getting smaller by the minute. She followed the doctor down a long hallway. Outside a private room, 2 more security men stepped aside. The doctor opened the door, then left her alone. Jae-won lay against white sheets, making him look paler than he was. Various machines beeped steadily. His eyes were closed. Then, without opening them, he said, "Are you just going to stand there?" Despite everything, she smiled a little. "How did you know it was me?" "Your perfume," he said, opening his eyes. 3 years, and you still use the same one. Kira moved to the chair beside his bed, not sure what to say. "What do you say to your ex-husband who just took a bullet for your child?" "The boys?" he asked. "Sleeping. In the waiting room. Your men are watching them." He nodded, then winced at the movement. "Min-jun? They said he's being handled." Something dark crossed Jae-won's face. "He tried to hurt our son." "To hurt you," she corrected softly. "Same thing." He closed his eyes again, looking exhausted. "Then, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you years ago." Kira tensed. "What?" "The first baby," he said quietly. "The one we lost. It wasn't natural." She froze. "What?" "One of my rivals, the Chung family. They..." He struggled to find the words. "They poisoned your tea. At that garden party. Remember? You felt sick afterward." The room seemed to tilt. "The miscarriage was deliberate?" He nodded, not looking at her. "I found out the day it happened. Too late to stop it. I tracked down everyone involved. Made them pay. Why didn't you tell me?" Her voice cracked. "You were devastated," he said simply. "You were already broken by the loss. I thought if you knew it was intentional, that someone had deliberately hurt our baby to get to me." He shook his head. "I couldn't do that to you." Suddenly, so many things made terrible sense. The increased security after the miscarriage. The food tasters. The restricted movements. All those rules, she whispered. The bodyguards. Not letting me go anywhere alone. "I thought you were controlling me." "I was trying to protect you," he said, his voice tight with pain that had nothing to do with his wound. "Badly. Wrongly. But that's what I was trying to do." "You should have told me the truth," Kira said. "I had a right to know." "Yes." He met her eyes directly. "I should have trusted you with the truth. Instead, I tried to protect you in silence. And I lost you anyway." They sat quietly for a few minutes, the machines beeping steadily in the background. "So that night," she finally said. "When your mother said to end this permanently. I told her I would handle her," he confirmed. "That if she ever spoke about you that way again, she would no longer be part of my life. Or the family business." His eyes closed briefly. "I never imagined you would think I meant." "I ran because I was terrified," Kira admitted. "I thought the man I loved had agreed to have me killed. And I spent 3 years thinking you had been kidnapped." Or worse. His hand moved across the sheet, reaching for hers. She hesitated, then let him take it. I tore the world apart looking for you, Sora. Kira, she corrected softly. It's Kira now. Not to me, he said. Never to me. Before she could answer, the door opened. A nurse stood there with two sleepy boys, each clutching a stuffed animal. I'm sorry, she said, looking embarrassed. They woke up crying for their mom, and your, security people thought it would be better to bring them to you. It's fine, Kira said, standing to take Eli's hand. Miho hung back, staring at Jaewon with solemn eyes. Who are you? The little boy asked directly. Jaewon looked at Kira, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. I'm your father, he said, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. Miho's eyes widened. For real? For real. Mama said you were far away. I was, Jaewon agreed. But I've been looking for you for a very long time. Miho considered this. Did you get hurt because of the bad man? Yes. But I'm going to be okay. The little boy moved closer to the bed, examining Jaewon with the direct curiosity only children possess. You look like me and Eli. That's because you're my sons. Jaewon's voice cracked on the last word. Eli, always shyer than his brother, peeked around Kira's leg. Are you staying? The question hung in the air. Jaewon looked at Kira, letting her answer. We're all going to figure that out together, she said carefully. But right now, we need to let your daddy rest and get better. Daddy. The word felt strange on her tongue. But not wrong. 6 months later. The house overlooking Jeju Island's southern coast was nothing like the mansion they had shared in Seoul. Smaller. Warmer. Windows everywhere to catch the sea breeze. Kira stood on the deck, watching the twins chase each other on the beach below. Their laughter carried up to her on the wind. They were adapting better than she had expected. New country. New language. New life. But children were resilient in ways adults could only envy. She heard footsteps behind her. Didn't need to turn to know who it was. Meeting go okay? She asked as Jaewon joined her at the railing. As well as can be expected. He looked tired but satisfied. The transition is working. Most of our legitimate businesses are now separated from the other activities. It had been his idea to slowly extract himself from the Black Lotus's more dangerous operations. Not all at once. That would be impossible, even suicidal. But piece by piece, building a wall between his family and the darkness of his inheritance. His mother had been removed from any position of influence. His brother was, somewhere. Jaewon never said where, and Kira never asked. The twins squealed as a wave caught them by surprise, soaking their shorts. Eli's getting stronger, Jaewon observed. His asthma seems better here. The sea air helps. Kira smiled. Also, he has a dad who carries him on his shoulders when he gets tired, instead of a mom who had to make him push through. Jaewon's arm slipped around her waist. She let it stay. They weren't back to where they had been. Maybe they never would be. Too much had happened. Too many scars. But they were finding a new way forward. Slowly. Carefully. Kira wasn't naive. She knew who he was. What he had done. What he was still capable of. But she also knew who he was with her. With their sons. And this time, she was choosing to stay, with her eyes open. Any regrets? Jaewon asked quietly, echoing a question he had asked her on their honeymoon, a lifetime ago. She thought about it. Really thought. One, she finally said. He tensed slightly. I wish we hadn't wasted 3 years. He relaxed, turning her to face him. Then let's not waste another second. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. Not to the gilded cage she had run from. But to the man who had been searching for her all along. And that, my friends, is the story of Sora and Jaewon. A love that survived secrets, betrayal, 3 years of silence, and enemies who wanted to destroy them. Now tell me honestly, did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? Because if it did, I need you to do me a favor. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss stories like this one. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I love connecting with you guys. Also, let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were Sora? Would you have stayed? Would you have run? Would you have given him a second chance? I can't wait to read your answers. Until the next story, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you soon.